Hello everyone, my name is Issa Solís and my presentation title is Why is the Collision Model a Holistically Effective Strategy to Rehabilitate Incarcerated Youth? The New Connections Collision Project, or NCCP, is a collaboration between Kennesaw State University, specifically the Department of Theater and Performance Studies, in addition to criminal justice and sociology students as of the semester, the Department of Juvenile Justice in Georgia, and the Alliance Theater Collision Project. So where the New Connections Collision Project gets its name from is the Connections Graduate Program under the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. As it says on their website, the Connections Graduate Program, or CGP, is designed to prepare Georgia Preparatory Academy and GED graduates opportunities for college and or careers that demand them to be intelligent, skilled, and critical thinkers. As graduates plan to transition to their communities, CGP will prepare them to adjust to everyday educational or professional life and empower them to understand the social, moral, and legal implications of what they do. CGP curriculum provides in-depth exposure to a range of disciplines that assists graduates to be college, career, or life ready upon their release from the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. In order to achieve this, the CGP has 5 programmatic thrusts, which are Number 1, educational development. Number 2, employability development. Number 3, leadership development. Number 4, life skills and enrichment development. And number 5, wellness development. It's no question why our partnership with Kennesaw State University would lead to an achievement of the first 4 programmatic thrusts. But what I'm going to talk about is why the DJJ wants to work with specifically the Department of Theater and Performance Studies as part of their Wellness Development Programmatic Thrust. If you take a look at this chart, it describes the population and youth development campuses within Georgia in addition to regional youth detention centers in Georgia. It shows the admissions and the average daily population. You'll notice that for Georgia's YDCs, the average daily population is 234, and the average daily mental health caseload is 153, which is 65% of the daily population. And for Georgia's RYDCs, their average daily population is 752, and the average daily mental health caseload is 362, which is roughly 49% of the daily population. I say all of that because justice-involved youth in the United States often have a history of trauma, abuse, and other forms of polyvictimization, i.e., they are not bad. They are young adults with high levels of trauma. The impacts of this trauma materialize in different ways. One way is behavioral. Most of the DJJ's mental health caseload, 52.2%, is composed of disruptive disorders. We know that adolescents and young adults can sometimes be disruptive. It's where we're at in our brain development until age 25. However, sometimes this is a more difficult to deal with problem given the added variable of trauma. Some of the behavioral impacts of trauma include aggression, risk-taking, or at least more than of a typical adolescent, and lastly, withdrawal. Trauma can also have cognitive and emotional effects like distrust, particularly of adults, and a lack of future orientation. Lack of future orientation is a very important topic within NCCP because what this term means is that DJJ graduates are operating in a constant fight or flight mode as a result of trauma to the point that they cannot see past tomorrow or next week or next year and create future plans or even dream. After all that talk of trauma, I'd like to invite you all to take deep breaths and start to calm as I read a quote from Building a Trauma-Responsive Educational Practice by M. Daniels. It reads, "In a calm state, ability to learn is unhampered by stress-related cortisol in the brain, and people are able to access their prefrontal cortex, the seat of higher thought and learning." So you might be thinking, why theater? Of course, everybody starts to think about therapy when they start to think about mental health. But it's kind of isolating when you're the only one talking across from your mental health counselor. It brings a village in which you can talk about your problems and feel like you're not alone, because you're not alone. It also allows you to share your story at a distance. Of course, when we're talking to people involved in the justice system, there are cases that they probably can't talk about. And implementing a story narrative into this allows censorship in a very meaningful way that you can still talk about the things that affect you without talking about the things that you probably shouldn't talk about because of your case. It also offers a final product in which someone can feel a sense of accomplishment from having completed the project and eventually having something to show for it. And of course, as we've talked about, it allows people to dream. Dream beyond tomorrow, dream beyond next week, dream beyond next year. And it's no question, there's no denying it. This is heavy. Something that Dr. Christine Doyle brought up is a quote by Rachel Naomi Remen. You can't walk through water and expect not to get wet. This is a quote that is referencing mental health involvement. If you're talking about trauma, it's very difficult, at least, for you not to get some of the blowback from that trauma as well. It might not affect you directly as the person telling the story, but it can still affect you on an empathetic level. So, something that we started to talk about within our class is what makes us moisturized? What makes us feel good? What makes us feel A-okay? What makes us feel 90% to where I'm okay? And what makes us crispy? What makes us over-fried, not moisturized, ashy, and overall a feeling of not being okay. There's a chapter that we often used from My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. It was the soul nerve. And this chapter recognized that there is a toll on bodies of color, people of color, as a result of generations of trauma. And within the soul nerve is a training on calming your soul nerve. Because, as Resmaa Menakem cites, the soul nerve is responsible for calming the fight or flight mode within your body, which allows you to be calm, to be at peace, to find inspiration, and be at a higher point of learning. If you're in a fight or flight mode, it's a lot harder for you to learn, for you to be inspired, for you to be creative. And so it's essential to be in a calm state. And that is what his exercises accomplish. We also practiced self-care in class. For example, our professor Marlon Burnley, he walked us through a meditation, and this helped us just to have that within our toolkits to see if there's any practice that we can have for ourselves in moments of stress, not just within this project, but in general. And the opening circle is to see where people are at so that we can support them or give them space as necessary. And this is something that we do with the DJJ students as well. And the closing circle is just to get a gauge of, was this time that we had together effective? Were there any feelings that you had as a result of what we talked about? And to pull from M. Daniels, Building a Trauma Responsive Educational Practice, she talks about shifting our queries from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Again, DJJ graduates are poly-victimized individuals. They are not bad. And so this is something very important to think about. We follow the implementing a connect, protect, respect, and redirect approach by having class discussions about source material and having writing prompts to see the connection in DJJ graduates' own perspectives to reading the source material. Now, Adrienne Marie Brown's principles of emergent strategy on facilitation are: there is always enough time for the right work, never a failure, always a lesson, move at the speed of trust, less prep, more presence, what you pay attention to grows. The Collision Project does this already in a you didn't need that much research to know that it works kind of way, but I wanted to show this as proof that the collision model really is a great strategy, not only for inspiring future generations of artists, but also future generations in general. Some of the past literary inspirations are Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb and Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry. This year's literary inspiration is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. The books by Amanda Gorman were very uplifting and spoke of community within the United States, which helped create a sense of belonging within NCCP graduates from the DJJ. If you didn't know already, Amanda Gorman is a young Black American woman who is the youngest poet laureate and the youngest inaugural poet. She read The Hill We Climb as President Biden's inauguration at the age of 22. Long Way Down, however, was a little heavier and was connected to our goal to address lack of future orientation. For those of you who are not familiar with Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, here is an excerpt from the book titled The Rules. The rules. Number 1, crying. Don't, no matter what. Don't. Number 2, snitching. Don't, no matter what. Don't. Number 3, revenge. If someone you love gets killed, find the person who killed them and kill them. As I said, it's very heavy, but this is also a reading that was used in book clubs and literature classes within the DJJ. This is not something that is unfamiliar and triggering. And let's be honest, maybe these rules are the reality for some of the graduates within the DJJ. As Jason Reynolds says in Long Way Down, these rules were not meant to be broken. They were meant for the broken to follow. For some, they may not see that there's a choice, but we know as outsiders that there is a choice against the rules. Long Way Down is the story of a boy named Will who finds himself having to execute rule number 3 after his brother gets killed. In his journey to execute rule number 3, he goes down the elevator of his apartment complex and it stops on each floor. He is joined by ghosts from his past who were victims of the rules, and he is left asking whether the rules are a choice. In having Long Way Down as our source material, we hope to humanize the experiences that DJJ graduates have and to hopefully show them that there is a possibility of living a long life and having a future orientation without the rules, whatever those rules may be. Now to talk about the collision model from which NCCP was formed. The word collision is used to describe the phenomenon of a young adult colliding with literary source material and local professional artists. So on a typical day, KSU students, faculty, and local theater artists present a literary source material. We usually read it together or perform it in front of the DJJ graduates, and we all talk about specific words or phrases that stuck out to us. This creates a word bank. And later, we assemble our own haikus based on this word bank. And haikus are composed of 3 lines. The first line is 5 syllables, the second line is 7 syllables, and the third line is 5 syllables. So 575. These haikus eventually get put together and moved around so that it's an entirely new piece from the original. This gives not just DJJ graduates, but all young adults a sense of agency. It validates the use of source material as many artists do, instead of pretending that all art must be new inventions. In speaking to DJJ teachers and administrators, we have learned that there is not much room for self-expression within the DJJ's school system. And of course, this is not from malintent, but their goals are to teach and educate graduates in order to make them employable. And let's not forget that the DJJ is also a correctional facility for justice-involved young adults. Sometimes people have bad days, which can disrupt other people that are having good days. Sometimes there are situations that require an entire block of dorms to be isolated. Sometimes teachers have to speak up about a graduate's behavior. And just overall having to live, eat, sleep, pray, and dream within the same building, having limited exposure to the outside world. The implementation of NCCP allows DJJ graduates to escape the ordinary day full of restrictions and speak their own truths instead. NCCP has existed since 2019, so we've implemented interviews for DJJ teachers and graduates in order to make sure that it's working. Some of the results of involvement in NCCP include improved confidence, the development of a personal voice, and future life orientation. The conclusion is theater is therapy. In participating in NCCP, I have practically gotten a degree in theater therapy, and I don't need to go to New York for it. I can do it right here in Kennesaw, Georgia. My second point is that future generations need our support. We can't just expect future generations to break generational trauma and break generational cycles without our support. And going along with that, justice involvement is based on trauma. Sometimes nothing else. And juvenile detention shouldn't be punishment, it should be rehabilitation. How can we expect juvenile detention residents to not be involved within justice again if we do not do something different? We can't just punish and punish over and over again. We have to have some sort of rehabilitation. And I'm very glad that the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice has this as their focus: rehabilitation and making them employable. Thank you so much for your listening. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you.